And
Oh,
they
okay.
would work a good, I don't know, 12 hours, 14 hours, 16 hours a day for basically like $100 a week. Um,
Oh,
they would live on like the meat that they picked up for the tigers. They would get old expired meat from like Walmart or whatever to feed to the tigers. But they didn't have any food to eat. So they would go through and pick out the best of those and eat out of that. And it just made me feel like what he was doing was taking advantage of the poor people, the people who don't have another choice. And it really made me feel like how the missionaries, honestly, then and now, prey on the people who are needy, right?
oh, yeah.
So it kind of reminded me of like they go to England and get these people who are working 14, 16 hours a week or a day. And, hey, we have a better life for you in America. You just have to join this church. You know, and we
Right.
won't tell you there's no polygamy, right? So that when you come over, right? And it kind of reminded me of how you pull them in a little bit at a time by helping them, right? Until you're in. And then you're all
Right.
the way in and you don't have much of a choice anymore.
Right.
So that's one of the things that he's doing. Another thing that I thought was really interesting was so Joe Exotic is gay, which I have no problem with. You do you. He ended up having at least 3 boyfriends throughout the series, and I don't know that I think there's another one now. He's actually in jail right now, which is
Right.
also like Joseph Smith, but um, uh, so his boyfriends. This is actually really interesting. Is that they were all very young. So Joe Exotic was, I would say, in his 30s, and I should have looked this up before I said this, but somewhere in his 30s.
Yeah.
And
Everybody
he,
knows the Tiger King.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But he was dating and marrying young men, 18, 19-ish
Uh,
age. But on top of that, he did marry 2 at the same time. So he was in a polyamorous, which is fine. Once again, you do you, but polygamy in there somewhere. And to
right.
me, it's the age difference. I mean, I kind
Yeah.
of feel like if you are making the decision it's something you want, you go right ahead. But if you're
Right.
being coerced or forced into it, it's a different story. And as the story goes on, we kind of learn that none of these young men that he was dating were actually gay. They were straight,
Oh,
and in fact, 2 of them were sleeping with other people on the compound, girls on the
yeah.
compound. One of them got another girl pregnant and ended up leaving Joe Exotic to go live with his new family.
Oh,
But what was happening was that he was taking boys who needed a home, who wanted love, who were in bad places, and giving them the love and what they needed. And on top of that, he was also supplying them with drugs, with um, a truck, with guns, with all the lifestyle that they wanted. And so
right.
basically, these young boys were just giving him what he wanted
Right.
to get what they needed.
Yeah.
And once again, it kind of reminded me of Joseph Smith. Now, Joseph Smith didn't have money or, drugs or anything like that, but he was giving them something even better, eternal life.
Yeah. Yeah.
He
But
was
he did have like the house in Nauvoo. I remember seeing a picture recently where they showed the mansion in Nauvoo, and then they showed the surrounding little cabins around it, and how that was going to be a hotel, and
Yes, and
and yeah.
did you see the thing? I think it was Bill Reel, RFM, talking about how he would sign over plots
Yes.
to his women,
Yes.
his polygamous.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't know.
Yeah.
So yeah, he there and not just them, but also their families, like selling
Right.
things to them at a
Right.
different price. And yeah, so that was a big thing for me.
Yeah.
Just how you can take advantage of people who need you, who need something.
Right.
And then hear this. So Joe Exotic actually ran for governor, which
Mm.
totally reminded me of Joseph Smith running for president of the United States, right?
Right.
Um,
Right.
he wants to be the big man, like he wants to
Right.
be the one in charge of everything.
Right.
And then this one is good to you guys. If you follow Tiger King, you've also know that there was a big thing with Carol Baskin. Like he
Yeah.
and Carol Baskin had this big, like, we're, you're bad. No, you're bad. Like this big
Yeah.
thing. They're basically both doing the same thing, but
Yeah.
they're mad
My
at each other.
tiger sanctuary is good. Your tiger sanctuary is bad.
Right. Just like spiritual wifery and polygamy. They're doing the same thing, but the
Right.
other person is wrong.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
You mean like FLDS versus
Ah,
Mormon?
there's a good analogy there. Yeah.
Yes.
What Warren Jeffs was doing, is
Doing the
bad,
same
but
thing, but
yeah.
no, you're not doing what I'm doing.
yeah, with
Yes.
the exact same scriptures, by the way. It's like, okay.
Well,
Yeah.
and I always, I never really got, even when I was a believing Mormon, I never really got the John C. Bennett thing. I never understood, how is what he's doing any different than what Joseph Smith is doing? Like,
It's
I
all
never,
a power. Yeah. It's all a power dynamic. Everything that's the thing is it's boils down to vulnerability compared to power. Who
Yep.
has the power?
Yep,
And
it does.
and it's usually some kind of a male who has the charisma to attract these
Mhm.
people, and then, like you say, taking advantage of people
Yep.
that are I remember, oh my gosh, it was the freakiest thing. My husband and I think my husband was in the bishopric or something. I'm trying to remember why the heck we were there, but we had gone to a special meeting for ward missionaries, training ward missionaries and this kind of thing. And they actually had like a PowerPoint presentation. They had us do role play where we would turn to the person sitting next to us and practice. It was like I was at an Amway convention and I was being taught how to upsell the Amway, only this was the
Sure.
gospel. And both my husband and I were like, this is so uncomfortable. I
Yep.
cannot handle this. And so it's just a selling, it's a marketing thing.
Well,
Yeah.
and so something that I found really interesting was somebody who was talking about going and living on Joe Exotic's plantation, whatever you want to call it.
Compound.
She
Oh,
actually said it was a lifestyle change. Like you were
Oh.
changing your life. And it totally triggered me because I remember when I was a believing Mormon and I went out with the missionaries once to help talk to a family who was interested in the church, and they were teaching them the Mormon things. And one of the things that always bothered me was I always felt like nobody was ever honest with how much the Mormon church asked from you. Like nobody was ever honest about that. It was all about, you believe it, you go to church, it's great. Yeah, no, they take over your whole life. And I just felt like I wanted to tell them this. And so I'm sitting there with the missionaries and I'm like, okay, this is a lifestyle change. Like this is not just joining a church. This is a lifestyle change. Your whole life will change. And you should have seen those missionaries looking at me like, stop
Yeah.
talking, stop talking.
Yeah.
And these people never came back. And because it's not just a church, it's a lifestyle change. It takes over
which
your life.
it was on, like I say, on the Tiger King compound.
Yes.
And exactly what you're saying. You've got a person that's charismatic. You've got people that are underprivileged, and he's offering them a lifestyle that they wouldn't have otherwise.
Yes.
And so it's just a power dynamic that is so
Yep.
so out there, and yet people don't see it. Like you say, you put God into it, and that eliminates all responsibility. It's like, well, yeah, but that guy was a drug addict and all this kind of stuff. This was from God. He was chosen from God.
So I got to tell you one more and then I'm done. So here's my one.
No. Yeah.
So this was actually not Joe Exotic, but one of the guys that he like studied under and learned from. He also had his own place that was very much like a cult. Doc Antle, I think was his name.
I
but
remember him.
Yeah. And one of the things the girls talked about was they actually changed their name. So when they went to work for him and they were learning how to like train the tigers and everything, they changed their name. And one of the girls they talked to literally said, when you change your name, you change who you are. And I was like, oh my gosh.
Wow.
Because that's a sign of a cult, right? Changing your name. And man,
Yeah.
how interesting is that? So anyway, I'll throw that one in there.
a new name, which is given to you because of the new person that you have become. Oh my
Out with the
gosh.
old and in with the new.
Interesting. That is very good, Trish. Okay, so Liz, well, who did you want to highlight? Did you
You
want to highlight
guys,
someone?
I'm kind of embarrassed because I didn't do my homework.
No problem.
If you guys have an idea, or I'm just gonna wing something, unless there's somebody you guys can think of.
Well,
I feel bad I didn't.
No. In my picture, I have the Tiger King. I can't help but compare Jeffrey Epstein. I mean, especially when they came out with that picture of Jeffrey Epstein, or remember the pictograph that they just found of Joseph Smith?
Yes.
And I looked at that and I looked at this picture and I'm like, oh my gosh, they're like clones. I mean, it's insane, So, and the way that Joseph Smith had, what were they called? Mothers of Israel, who would go and find the girls and talk them into it and tell them how great it was and convince them that polygamy was a great thing. And I'm like, well, there's, Ghislaine Maxwell. And it's not a new book. It's the same book. It's the same instruction. It's like they all got a copy of Think and Grow Rich and read it all. I mean, if there's a book out there for how to start a cult and, I'm not saying Think and Grow Rich, but you know what I mean? People who read that become successful salespeople because this is a concept. So it's like, is there like a book out there for con men that they all read and go, oh, wow, Joseph Smith did that. What a great idea. I'll hire another woman to convince other women, It's the same pattern.
Don't you really? I've always felt like, because the way his family were always trying to do get rich quick schemes, and they were always trying to sell, like, I don't know, they weren't tarot card readings, but he eventually, called them patriarchal blessings and put his dad over that. But I think that all stems down, and Mormonism has high rates of fraud.
Right.
And what's it called? Multi-level
marketing. Yeah.
And if you look back at what Joseph Smith was doing, I don't see a big difference.
No. I mean, you don't hear about what Sidney Rigdon actually contributed to the church. I mean, if you read, if you get on LDS.org and you research a little bit of Sidney Rigdon, it'll say like there was a huge conversion. The church grew, by the hundreds. And I'm like, yeah, because Sidney Rigdon brought his congregation. It wasn't like the missionaries. Yeah, and so it's like, wow, okay, there's the twisting, just that little twisting, which by the way, I just want you to know, Trish, I did not start the live broadcast until you were talking. So we're a little bit short. Everybody just missed my whole Charlie Chaplin thing, but I might do it at the end. But anyway, yeah, but we were just comparing how people in the world or people in your particular century, like right now we're in 2022, so we all know about Jeffrey Epstein, we know about Keith Raniere, we know about current issues, we know 2 years ago we knew about Warren Jeffs because that was what was going on right there. And people, you could probably have a group of Methodists, Catholics, Lutherans, Jewish, all different kinds. You could have people sit around and they'd be like, did you hear about what Jeffrey Epstein was doing? And they would all be going, I know, that's despicable. I can't believe what he did. And, Prince Andrew and Bill Clinton and Trump and all these wealthy people, they were just, and you're like, that is despicable. And they're like, let me tell you about Joseph Smith. They're like, oh, no, he's a prophet. He was called to God.
The thing is, we don't even have to go that far away, because we could look at Daybell. Right?
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Happened. And
I thought about using him as my person today. But
good.
I'm
that
going
would be a good
impromptu.
one to compare to. Yeah,
do it. Feeling, I'm going impromptu here. So let's go into that a little bit. If you guys want to help me out.
I've been following that like forever. So I am with you. I cannot understand how anyone cannot see that everything he was teaching, everything he was doing was from the beginning of the church. So
Right.
what'd you see?
Okay, before he and Lori Vallow were together, I don't know how I ran across him. Guess it's because I'm always on the internet researching. But I saw him and I'm like, oh, he's an author. And then
Successful,
there was a
publishing house.
there was a YouTube video, and this was before his wife had died, anything. And there was a video of him on YouTube, and I don't know if I could find it now, but he had been called to a bishopric as a counselor. I don't know if it was first or second or what. And he made a YouTube video about how ecstatic he was. And so, I mean, it was just so over the top. I have a mantle. I don't know. I'm probably,
because of his calling. He's like, I have been called
Yes.
of God.
And
He
I
made a
was just
YouTube
like,
video?
oh my
Wow.
gosh. Because we've all been in wards or stakes where there's people that campaign for positions, right?
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So I'm
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh, this guy's like not just your average, I want that position. He's just like,
Wow.
that was so weird. So when the other things started to come out, I was just like, oh my word, he wanted to break away and start his own cult.
Yeah.
He did, for sure. Yeah.
And how did he get that Lori Vallow's gorgeous. I'm sorry.
Well,
Well,
not
he
only
looks
that,
like
but
a
when you
pug.
listen to her, like remember that friend that she claimed had her kids, and the friend called her up and said, "Why did you do that to me? How could you call me a friend?" And she was quoting scripture and she honestly to this day still believes that she is following the Mormon religion, and she's following the scriptures, and she's been called to do this. She's a prophetess in some way. I think she really believes that.
I think so too.
It scares me because that really scared me, because when I was all in. I never wanted to break away and make my own.
Yeah.
But it scares me. It makes me wonder, because her family was fairly average.
Yeah.
And I just thought, could I have got tangled up in something so messy because I had so much cognitive
Like if she was your
dissonance?
neighbor, like if she was your neighbor, would you have been like her best friend? Is that what you're saying? Like I would have like,
No, I'm
I love
wondering if
you.
I would have been her.
Oh,
Like,
No,
I hope
I
not.
get it. I totally
Yeah.
get it, because if you
I'm
start
not, but like,
if you
I
start
was
seeing
like,
things
well,
that-
someday.
oh, I'm sorry. If you start seeing things
No.
in the church that's not right, that you're like, but this isn't what they were taught at the beginning, but things have changed. I don't understand why they've changed. And you start doing that research and seeing that, I could imagine that you start looking for something else, something that,
I mean,
fits it.
you're going to think I'm a lunatic, and you'll maybe never ask me to do this with you again. But I was starting to wonder, like, could I walk on water if I worked really hard? And,
because you were
could
so devoted to the gospel and you were doing everything you were told to
Yes.
do. And
I mean,
know
I'm
what?
embarrassed. I should be embarrassed to admit that, but now I'm just like, okay, there's been so many of us duped that I'll
Yeah.
just tell all my crazy thoughts. So
No,
I don't.
Do you
end up-
guys follow Wendy Jensen? You need to follow Wendy Jensen. She is a wonderful
Okay.
person. She lives here in Arizona, and she talks about that. She says, I'll have to add her on when I post this, but she says when she and her husband left the church, one of the reasons why she left was because she knew she was perfect, but her husband was not pulling his end of the deal of the priesthood stuff. And she had to get those kids because she was doing everything right, and he was just not doing everything right. And she was going to the bishop and she was telling him everything. He wasn't doing this and he wasn't doing that. And I'm perfect and I'm the spiritual leader in my home. And she said it took a therapist to say, oh, you think you're perfect, and she was like, I do.
I didn't do that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I never did that because my husband was
But I
amazing.
can
Isn't
see-
it, priesthood person, but
But
yeah.
I can see how someone could get caught up in that.
Yeah.
I
yeah.
was
If
like
you're a
trained to have
perfectionist,
my
yeah.
calling and election made sure.
You were like, let's see, and my next step for that, it'd be, who do I need to
Yes.
know? Oh, that's interesting. Well, I know, because I have had people in my past that, like a gospel doctrine teacher or something like that. And I'm like, you're bucking for a position here. This isn't like a history class. This is more like a political campaign or something
Yes,
like that.
and they launched those
Yeah.
campaigns right in the classroom.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
I guess
and-
that's where that charisma comes in, right? That we've kind of been talking about this whole time, is like, you have to be that. You have to be
Right.
the one, you know?
Right. Well, which
And
follows into the critical thinking. If you're not a critical thinker, you can't look at those people and go, something's off here. There,
Mhm.
if you're just like, oh no, he's such a nice guy. I know he's a little quirky, but he's such a nice guy. And you're like, no, he might be starting his own little cult, And then when it happens, people are like, I would have never. I mean, like Jeffrey Epstein, he had the freaking owner of Banana Republic. The man had no credentials. He faked his, his what's the word? Resume. He faked his resume. But yet he got himself into a position with the owner of Banana Republic, who owned Victoria's Secret and Old Navy and The Gap and all that kind of stuff. And then when he finally stole like $80 million or something, that's when the guy was like, oh, crud, I really liked you, So, I mean, same thing. You've got Joseph Smith, all these credentials. He's got a freaking blue military suit with the saber, and he's going to, and then you hear about the Council of 50 and how they, named him king. He was going to be the king of the world. And it's like, the whole move to Utah, it was like, we're going to start our own little world. We don't even want to be a part of the United States anymore because they're just not listening to us. They're not doing what we want them to do. Well, then you see Jim Jones, and he's taking his people to Africa, and
Well,
it's
honestly,
like,
that's what Chad Daybell was trying to do up in
it was.
Idaho.
in Idaho.
He was trying to bring everybody up there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did you know that he was? Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Did you know that he was bringing people down to, I think it was the Holiday Inn conference room and having conferences, meetings? There were people following him and Lori. They had
I did hear that it was big too. Yeah.
Yeah, it was like, I'm trying to think of where Village Inn is on River Road, where you come right off a bluff.
You're so funny. She thinks we know.
And that hotel conference room, I heard it was overflowing.
Now, was that in Idaho or where's that at?
No, St. George.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, in St. George. Okay. So there were
they know
people
where
that
to
were
go
following him.
too, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. Well, you hear all these stories of people that, take advantage. Like, I don't know if you guys are Housewives of Salt Lake people followers. If you watched any of Housewives of Salt Lake,
I tried to a couple of times.
I know.
Can't do that.
I was a huge follower. I followed Housewives of OC, Housewives of Beverly Hills, Housewives of New York, and then I followed Housewives of Salt Lake. No, I don't follow that one because a couple of years ago it changed. All the old people were gone, and they brought in all these newbies, and I'm like, bleh. So I changed. But I had to watch Salt Lake, and so one of the housewives there is, I think this month she's being sentenced. She had
is it
scam.
Shaw?
Yeah, Jen Shaw, and I think her program. My mom was taken over by what she did. She had this thing where they would call people and they'd say, look, we're going to set up a business for you. We're going to build the website for you. We're going to we're going to help you along. We're going to show you how to do it. $30,000. My parents gave this thing. They set up a website
my gosh,
and it was like, you're going to go through Amazon and here's your website. It was like www.4,000 words. I mean, it was like, Mom, nobody's going to do that. Why would they go through you to buy something from Amazon when they could buy something from Amazon and just go Amazon, poop? Why would I type in, the New York City of the United States of America, And then they were told she would get a credit for everything people bought through Amazon. But anyway, so yeah, and that's what they were doing. And so now she's being sentenced for like mail fraud or some other kind of conspiracy. But you think that, like, how can people be so unaware to be taken advantage of like that? There you go. My father, and both my mom and dad, they're like, here's our credit card. No problem. So yes, if you're a true believer, you have a strong testimony and somebody's giving you these things, you're like, well, they're a good member of the church. He used to be in the bishopric.
Yep.
They're good. And if I hear one more time, but they're so nice.
I feel like I'm on the opposite side now, where I'm afraid to trust anything. Like,
yes.
I used to be kind of open to things like, I'm going to call it energy work, but it's not weird. It's all weird. But anyway, I'm not saying it doesn't work, but like, I used to be pretty open to that stuff. And now I'm just like, everything seems like it's a lie to me, like everything. And
that is the sad part. You do become very cynical. You don't trust in, and especially with all the vaccine and all the stuff that's going on politically in our world right now, it's gotten to the point where I don't believe anybody that says anything about anything. I mean, I was watching some shows. I'm listening to this guy. He's a doctor. Got to go plant-based. I'm listening to this guy. He's a doctor. He's like, you need to eat red meat. I'm like, I don't know what to think anymore. You know?
Yeah. Snake juice guy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
but figure it out.
I know, but I just think the important thing though is to be made aware, and to try to encourage people to take that initiative to maybe be a little skeptical. I mean, maybe do a little research. And, like I used to, I'd watch a little bit of Fox News, and I'd watch a little bit of CNN, and then I'd watch a little bit of MSNBC, and then I'd watch a little bit of Good Morning America, and and pretty soon I was just like, I'm just going to go to Netflix because you people are driving me crazy. I don't believe any of you, and that's kind of where I am too. It's like, once you start, I don't know if you guys did this, once you start down the rabbit hole of the LDS Church, then because my deconstruction was all based on historical things, I started really digging into others. So I started listening to Bart Ehrman. So now I want to know if the New Testament is a bunch of baloney. So then you start listening to Sam Harris, because it's like, maybe the whole Bible is a bunch of baloney, And so you go down this, that's why people go from LDS to atheist. I'm like, well, that's a huge jump. But it's the I don't trust anything anymore, that you start going, I don't know what to believe.
Okay, I'm going to tell you my theory.
From the Hebrew Bible, the Bible's had so many books taken out, and gosh, I'm trying to gather my thoughts, but it's been added to and taken away. And I think you have to, even with the Bible, because the Bible has to be real in some aspect. Some
mythology that's a good parable that's going to teach you to be a good person. You could look at it like that.
I'm like, that happened to Odin in Norse mythology. And oh wait, that sounds like Zeus and Hercules, but all in all, you have to just, for me, I have to take the parts that make me feel good, and the rest I'm just kind of like, this book's pretty old. It's been fudged with way too much.
Well, and I think too, if you go down the list, and this is the thing where, like I said, if I listen to a little bit of Fox News, and I listen to a little bit of CNN, and then I listen to just, I'm just going to listen to Netflix because I can't take it anymore. But you start reading about some of the truths that we've been told, or stories that we've been whitewashed, right? So you have the treasure digging story. And I remember when I first started to do my deconstruction, I remember reading, and I don't know if it was Terrell Gibbons or who it was, but they said, maybe Joseph Smith, it was a treasure digger. The Lord used him because he needed that experience to then go on and translate the Book of Mormon, use the stone in the hat because of his experience with being a treasure digger. And I remember going, we'll
do anything We
Yeah,
will
that
do
makes sense.
anything to feed our cognitive dissonance.
Yeah. And then I heard, okay, so then I started hearing about the Kirtland Bank fraud, and I was like, ooh, that was bad. And then I read the book, Wife 19, and Edward Partridge. He was a wealthy man. He made wagon wheels and he was very successful. And then Joseph Smith would take advantage of him and take all his money, and he'd start up again. And he stuck with him for so long until he finally was like, I can't do this anymore. And I started, I was like, oh, that's not this, but you've got to read the LDS.org, and then you've got to go other sources so that you can make that decision. You cannot just go to one source. And that's,
Agreed.
like I said, listening to these doctors, it's like, this guy's plant-based, this guy's red meat, this guy's whatever. So you've got to, and then you've got to make those decisions. So the Salem trip where he had a revelation that there was silver underneath the house. And so he took, and the people that he was with had no idea where they were going. Where are we going, Joseph? Oh, I'll tell you when we get there. I mean, that's lying. I mean, that's lying. He risked these men's lives to go back and see if he could, because this church was so in debt. You've got Zion's Camp, which if you read it, the LDS.org, is like, yeah, there was a little bit of cholera. Some of the people were a little upset. But after all it was said and done, most of the apostles came from that experience. And it was just really a good, hard, and I'm like, was it though? Because I was telling Trish, I could be wrong, but if my recollection is correct, I believe Joseph Smith managed to collect enough money where he got on a steamship and was like, I'm on my way back, but you guys have a great time walking back to Kirtland, And so I was like, that's not right. And then we talked about the Nauvoo house and the bar that was set up there. And Joseph Smith thought he was going to have a tavern and there was going to be money, and poor Emma's making quilts and trying to bring some money into the house while he's out, campaigning. And then you've got the Council of 50 and the priesthood ban, if you want to get more modern. Now I just read on, it was in the Mormon land section of the Salt Lake Tribune, and they're talking about the temples that they're building in Africa and how they're going to Africa. And I'm like, and I'm sure that if you were believing LDS, you'd be like, see, what's their time? It wasn't their time in 1973, but now it's their time, and we've brought the gospel to them. I'm like, it's exactly what you said, Trish. It's like, or is it because they don't have the internet and they have a regime that really gives them kind of an icky life, and they're being offered free education. We'll pay for you to go on a mission. We'll help, exactly what they were doing in England, exactly what you said. They're going to go to the poor and the needy, say, we can give you a better life, which, you know what? Absolutely.
It's why my ancestors came here, and I don't care what anybody says.
Yeah. Where were your ancestors from?
England.
Okay. Yeah.
But they were poor, and they even Wilford Woodruff baptized some of my ancestors at what they call it, Bishop's Frome. Oh, they had heard him singing and followed him. But when you're promised, I mean, when you're promised you're barely getting by, or maybe some of them were even doing better. No, I don't know. That a bunch of my ancestors were bakers, and you get this promise to where you can go and be free, and who wouldn't jump on a ship?
Mm-hmm. They didn't know what they were that's doing. Why they all came. I mean, they all came for the golden streets, right? They were all paved with gold, and they were all promised a better life. And in a way, that's, but not all of them. I remember hearing when we took a tour of the Statue of Liberty, and the person said, this one guy said, I came here because the streets were paved with gold. What they didn't tell me was that I was going to do the paving. Mm-hmm. And, so, and it's funny, I just read another thing where they were saying how Ireland actually has never recovered from the potato blight, that the loss of the people that left Ireland has, even though they should be one of the strongest economies, but they're not, because they never really have recovered from the number of people that they lost. Wow. And so it's just amazing. But, it kind of goes back to, you cannot deny that culturally, there's a lot of really successful Mormon people because of the values and the standards, strength, education, its families pushed. I love the idea that, I remember hearing that one of the reasons why the church is so strong in some of the Latin American countries is because fidelity is,
An
a value
issue.
that's taught, and the word of wisdom stops people from drinking, and alcoholism breaks up a lot of families in those cultures. And so you can't deny the goodness of these programs, but you have to look at well, guess what? The Muslims, they don't have alcohol either. And they have a patriarchal society, and they also can kill their daughter. So there's always that, you got to look at the whole picture and go, yeah, but we got to get rid of some of those things,
I wouldn't be surprised if back in the day,
Yeah.
in
Well-
early Mormonism, who knows what they were doing out here while they were all alone with no
Yeah.
one to answer to.
Well, and you look at, the story of, was it Helen Mar Kimball, or was it one of the other ones who said her, for whether or not it was a sexual relationship or not, her life came to a halt. You can't go to dances. You can't live a,
That was Helen
teenage
Mar,
childhood.
wasn't it?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's like her life was completely upended because of that policy and that belief, so it doesn't take very much to see the comparison and to try to find some kind of, I don't know how you pull it all back together again and find some kind of a system that you can live within. But it's just interesting, the different reasons that you hear. I don't know if you guys listened to Mormonism Live last week with Nemo, but one of the things that he said was he was very lucky in the bishopric roulette, that his leaders have been amazing. The ward that he's in is very accepting. And then that's really the way I've been. I've had some really good, there's always been some wackos, but they were usually in the stake, so they weren't in our ward. But we've had some crazy stake presidents that, after they leave, you go, whoa, that guy's nuts, but he didn't really affect our lives, too much. He wasn't in our ward or anything. And he didn't come down with any policies that were cuckoo, except for, remember that, were you guys, you might be too, you remember when they came out for a while and said women are not to wear denim to church? It was right after their
Flip-flops.
and flip-flops. Yeah, it was right after the Olympics, when the Olympic team went to the White House and they were in like flip-flops, and somehow some leader, so now over the pulpit, they're saying no denim, no flip-flops, no open-toed shoes. And
Yeah, do wear nylons. Yeah, do wear nylons.
Yes. Yes.
No bare
Oh, I
legs.
hate
No bare legs.
those.
Yeah. I was like, have
no
you been
bare
in the
legs.
nursery? I'm surprised these people, come dressed at all. It's sit on the floor for an hour, 2 hours with these kids, that went away real quick. I mean, some of these crazy policies that, Kimball and some of the other prophets tried to push things through, and people were like, yeah, we're not doing that. I bet there needs to be more of that. Anyway, well, you guys, this has been great. I appreciate you jumping on a late Friday afternoon and joining us. And just to let the audience know, this is probably going to be our little trifecta here. We're probably going to be taking over the She Became Visible. I love having other people to talk to. So next week, we're going to come, I will let you know on Facebook what our subject will be for next week. And then, of course, we're getting closer to the holidays, so there might be a little hiatus for all of that stuff, because we are moms and grandmas and spouses. And so we got some other things going on, but regardless, anyway, so thank you so much for participating. It was so fun.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I hope that we've made just somebody think a little bit, just somebody kind of go, I never thought about that. I never compared that, probably not. We talked about biases, right? We don't affect anybody.
Yeah, even if there's someone inside the church that can make some changes inside the church.
Exactly. Isn't that what it's all
I
about?
want to make them on the outside, but if there's somebody else that wants to work and try to change the inside.
Yeah.
Do
Nemo
it.
mentioned that. He said that, he's hoping to make some changes. That's why he hasn't. He hasn't been excommunicated yet, but after last Wednesday,
I was wondering that same thing. I'm like, I think he might have stepped over.
Yeah, it's like, bye, see ya. I know. We'll see. I don't know though. Like I said, it sounds like he has a great stake president, unless he gets, I think probably, Dallin Oaks is like dear President so-and-so, your court will be held next week. Get that guy out of here. I don't know. We'll see. I mean, it happened to John Dehlin, happened to Bill Reel. So I don't know. So we'll see. Anyway, you guys have a great Friday.
Bye.
Yeah, have a great weekend. And
Okay.
everybody else, do what you need to do. Stand up, become visible. You're here. You have a purpose. Show your light. All right. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Renee and Trisha.
Well, thank you all. As I mentioned, I forgot to push the go live button. So in case you guys joined us a little bit late, our topic today was, where is your ethics bar? And we started out by comparing people in our entertainment world or in our world right now, things that people who have been sentenced to some kind of fraud or some kind of like, for example, I was saying how Elizabeth Holmes has been convicted with her Theranos business and how she deceived so many really brilliant people who, and I heard one person say that because of the feminist movement, that they were really kind of maybe looking and giving her a blind eye because they wanted to encourage a female Steve Jobs. Did they really want? And so they kind of, maybe they were a little skeptical, but they kind of went along with her because they thought, well, we really need to get some more women in that, you know, Bill Gates, Steve Jobs type of thing. So I started out the podcast by talking about how I had a family member who had found out a little bit of history about Charlie Chaplin and how they couldn't believe that he had 4 wives that were, 14, 15, 16. One of them, I think his last wife was 18. He was 51. And so I talked a little bit about Charlie Chaplin's history and how there were so many similarities between he and Joseph Smith, how they, by the time Charlie Chaplin was 29 years old, he had co-founded United Artists, and that gave him complete control over all of the rest of his films. And at 19, he signed on with the Keystone Corporation, and he invented the tramp. And so he became one of the most influential entertainers in the world. I mean, songs from his films are still sung today, and people dress up like him for Halloween. And he's, but he eventually died in Switzerland because his little marriages, his 4 marriages to young girls was a little bit of a controversy. And then he got a little bit political. And during World War II, he kind of started to lean a little bit towards the Soviet Union. And he was actually lived out the rest of his life in Switzerland. But he, came from a poor family. His father was an alcoholic. He wasn't educated. He had to educate himself. His education came from the streets. But he was very well read, and he got his education from his surroundings and this soup that he was swimming in. And that was so much like Joseph Smith. And he ended up being one of the most famous actors in the entire world. And Joseph Smith ended up building a religion that is, followed by millions today. So there was just a lot of similarities. And I just thought how interesting that someone could be that upset about his 4 marriages but not upset about the 40 marriages that Joseph Smith had. So we were just talking about biases, and we were just talking about how we learn and how we accept the faults of one person because they may be called of God, but we don't accept those exact same faults in another person because it's just your local grocer, right? So that's what we were talking about. And Trish talked about the Lion King and how he persuaded people, and he was very charismatic. And then Liz just brought in some of her recollections with Chad Daybell, and the people they were able to influence. And look at now we've got a Denver Snuffer and how people are following him. But good LDS believing people look at Denver Snuffer and they're like, no, he's crazy. And they're like, what's the difference? Anyway, really trying to encourage people to be critical thinkers, and that skepticism might be a good thing. So we really kind of encourage you to look at both sides. It's not a good idea to only watch Fox News. You got to branch out and look at the other sides. And one of the examples I gave, which I think I did a little later, was just how, you listen to one group of people, and they'll say, living a plant-based diet is what you need to do for your health. And then you listen to another group of doctors, and they'll say, eating grass-fed red meat is the best thing you can do for your body. So you really have to do your own research and make your own decisions on what's best for you. And so that was the purpose of our She Became Visible today, was just encouraging you to be a little bit skeptical and do a little bit of research and find out what works best for you. So have a great weekend. We will see you again next week. Bye.